There's never been a better time to have SiriusXM. With over 140 channels in your vehicle, your all-access trial includes more than ever before to enjoy online, on your phone, or at home. Create your own ad-free personalized stations powered by Pandora. Hear ad-free extra channels and enjoy favorite shows with SiriusXM Video on Demand. What you love is on now.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's your boy Ben Wu here, host of CMA Connected, presented by SiriusXM. And welcome back. It's work week. It's Monday. Hope everybody had a great summer weekend. All right, we're going to kick this week off strong with excited. I'm always excited when there's new brands thrown into the mix. When I say new brands, I guess new brands from a distribution level, not necessarily a new brand when it comes to the landscape of car audio. Of course, we're talking about Audiomobile. And that is a brand that many of you probably hold near and dear to your heart. It's got a long, rich history in the game. And it seems like we have a distributor that has kind of reconnected with the brand and will be representing Audiomobile in Canada. And that distributor is, of course, Importel. So what we're going to talk about today, we're going to get our 12-volt specialist, Romesh, on with us to talk to us a little bit about the Importel perspective and why they decided to, connect with Audiomobile and offer it to our dealers here in Canada. And of course, we're actually going to go to California live, where we have Matt Overpeck from Audiomobile, who'll be joining us to give us a little bit more educational perspective on the brand, on the products, maybe some tech stuff, so that you guys could evaluate for yourselves if this is the right brand for your shop. So without further ado, let's go ahead and connect with Mr. Romesh over at Importel. What's going on, Mr. Roku?
Hey, Ben, how you doing?
I hope you had a good weekend, brother.
I did, man. How about you?
Man, you know what? It was perfect weather. We're dead in the middle of summer now. Spent some time with the fam on the Saturday, and yesterday got out on the lake, so no complaints here. How about yourself?
You know what? It was kind of, decent weekend, busy. No complaints.
Did you have some fun at least?
I did, man. I did.
Right.
I did.
So, like I said, just
we're allowed out of our houses again in Ontario.
We are. That's good thing. I think things are really progressing. I'm actually going to go get my second vaccination today, so I'm pretty excited about it.
Oh, nice. Good for you.
Audiomobile is on the menu, sir. So recent announcement. I heard that. I think that came through the pipe last week, maybe, or something like that.
It was on Monday, I believe.
Yeah, exactly.
Presidential address.
I got some messages coming through my, network saying, "Oh, did you hear? Did you hear?" So, hey, perfect timing. We got this together with such short notice, but timely, right? So, talk to us. Yep. Why Audiomobile? Just before we get Matt on, just from what the inner discussions that you guys had, with Trevor and Pat and everything else.
Well, it really fits. I mean, as a solutions-based distributor, and with our focus on integrating into all the different vehicles and vehicle platforms and different challenges, really that that installers and shops are faced with, Audiomobile really, addresses a need that isn't anywhere else in the market, really. There's other brands that make subwoofers, and we can talk power specs and all those other things, and that's all great. But if you can't fit it in the vehicle, or if it takes up, 3/4 of the guy's trunk, and I mean, you have a family, I think most of us who've been in the industry for a while, we're all at that point where, balance of trunk space or application in trucks, with trucks being so prevalent in so many different markets, just trying to figure out how to make base without taking up the whole trunk. So Audiomobile really addresses that. That's all they really address.
Well,
is that specifically.
It's important that you bring that up, because I'll be honest, like everybody knows, I was in the game, I went away, and now I'm back, I'm learning, right? And Audiomobile, it's been there for a while. I am learning today with you and everybody who's watching, the solutions-based themes that I keep hearing from this brand. And it's interesting. So we're going to find out why exactly Audiomobile has carved out such a unique niche, because from what I've noticed, this is not a brand that does amplifiers and DSPs. They specialize in, subwoofers.
That's it. Yep. Driver. But it like I said earlier, they specialize in drivers, but the drivers are built around the requirement, right? Or the application. So rather than build a driver and they go, okay, cool, we got this great driver and it sounds amazing, and you've tested it on the table, on the bench, and in the room, and all the different places, and in a couple of vehicles. And now it's like, okay, now how do we fit it in the car? and we've got this 1.5 cubic foot enclosure or what have you, and it's great, but it doesn't fit under. We keep talking about trucks primarily, but
and when you say fit, do you mean like fit as in the physically, or are you talking about the enclosure space?
Well, both,
volume,
right?
Rather,
So one is depth, right? Because that sometimes can be an issue depending on where you're putting it, and then the enclosure requirement for that same driver. So 1 cubic foot for a 10-inch might not sound that big. Under a seat, it could be. Or in certain vehicles with just smaller trunks, like some of the hot hatches, you could have a $50,000 Golf R or whatever fancy car, and the guy's like, I don't want to put a cubic foot enclosure in that space. The trucks are the obvious one because that's easy, because we always run into that in the industry. Consumers do too. They go find this really big driver and they're like, this thing sounds amazing on the display board, and then they go, I want that in the truck, and everyone's like, okay, we have to lift the seat, we have to modify this, we have to do all these different things, or we have to make a custom enclosure where, either out of stacked fab or fiberglass or whatever you're going to do. All of which, if the customer has the budget, it's great. But if they don't, right, where does that go?
Okay, so we already know Importel's got some great brands. This seems to be a great complement to a solutions-based lineup that you always promote. Let's go ahead and bring Matt on. I'm sure he's going to share with us a lot of insight as to the brand, as well as the technology and the philosophy behind it. And let's hear it from the horse's mouth and get our learn on. What do you say?
Let's do it.
All right, let's go to California.
He might be sleeping though. It's early over there.
No, dude, we woke him up. I know we woke him up. He wasn't grouchy either. I was pretty impressed. But anyways, let's go ahead and get Matt on. Welcome to the show, Mr. Overpeck.
Good morning, or good afternoon.
Morning. Well, afternoon for us, morning for you. We thank you in advance for making the time to join us today.
Happy to be here. I'm delighted to have partnered with Importel. Romesh, thanks for giving a good overview recap of kind of our, as the French would say, raison d'être. Our reason for being.
Oh, wow. Look at you. A little French.
So, I'm looking forward to embarrass myself when we go out to Quebec and Montreal like that.
Well, we got Danny Prezzo who's watching us, and he's got you covered there, Danny, don't you? All right. So, Matt, we call this our lunchtime learning session. We are ready to learn. And, when we have a new brand come on with us, I always like to kind of start from the beginning. If you wouldn't mind, I'd like to ask you the question, give us a brief, how long has Audiomobile been around? What is your raison d'etre, as you would refer to? And what is your niche in the market? What is the positioning for Audiomobile as far as all the great drivers that are available on today's market?
Those are all really great, relevant questions. Originally Audiomobile, as we like to explain, literally and figuratively wrote the book on high-end car audio. Going back to the genesis of audio back in 1979, 1980, the brand started out as an electronics company and did amplifiers and processors, created the first amp rack, electronic crossovers, PWM switching power supplies, all that we take for granted. They coined the do it. So it's a legendary company, brand cash, more Audiomobile, small form factor, high performers. We like to think of ourselves in the niche as body of the industry, very special. Trouble amplifiers and other categories. Those have become more homogeneous, sort of all the same. And to Romesh's point, we try to reverse engineer a driver that provide relevant solutions. He's heard the expression, normally that means bigger. In regarding North America and Canada in particular, I like to say they have more trucks than trees up there. So as a result, if you don't ignore the solution into an increase in the market.
All right, Matt. Are you just to confirm with you, Romesh? Are you getting Matt coming in and out a little bit?
He's coming in and out. Yeah.
Okay, Matt. I'm going to ask you to do us a favor because we don't want to miss a single word you're saying. Do you think you could disconnect and come back in one more time just to make sure we got a solid connection? If you don't mind.
Yeah. Let me see how I would do this.
Yep, I'll kick you out. That sounded rude. I'll remove you from the studio, and you have the link already to come right back. And I just want to make sure we got a solid connection. In the meantime, I have some questions for Romesh, if you don't mind. Okay. Here we go.
Oh, put me on the spot.
Well, dude, I mean, I want to reiterate what he said. I know the messaging that what Matt was trying to say, and that is, Audiomobile's got a rich history, right? They literally set the bar on a lot of different things, and I think what's happened over time is they've kind of found their niche, right?
Absolutely.
And from what I haven't had a lot of opportunity to speak to a couple of dealers, especially in Canada, that really believe in the product and are super stoked about having a support from Importel about the product. But those who love it a lot. So I'd like to talk about that real quick before Matt comes back. What do you have to say about that, Romesh?
Well, I mean, when the opportunity came up, and like we do often, we will reach out to dealers and try to get some feedback through our rep force nationally. And dealer feedback from the guys that were already doing it was, I mean, they thought we were crazy if we didn't, right? That was
really.
Well, I mean, they're selling enough of it, right? It's not just, hey, we're stacking it into the stock room and it's just sitting there. They're turning through it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when they're telling us that we need, that we need to carry it because they need to sell it and they need to have a way to get it, it's not much of a stretch for us, right?
Right.
And then that gives us the confidence to know that nationally, if we have dealers that are doing so well in different areas, then with our distribution model and our boots on the ground, we should be able to help every dealer have these solutions to be able to convert those jobs that walk in the door into actual sales.
Yeah, you don't want
right?
to say no. You want to have good solutions, right?
Or
That's
you
the
don't
whole
want to
thing.
be in this like, hey, it's going to be 10 hours of fab work to build this enclosure, and while it's super cool and it looks amazing and it works amazing, it's 1,000 whatever 10 hours of labor plus materials is.
Not
right?
only that, what if it underperforms? What if it does? You're trying to make something work out of something that shouldn't be
right
working.
or even with or you're just at the edge of the smallest possible enclosure volume.
Correct.
Right. And that's what I think you're saying. So
yeah.
trying to be in the middle of the wheelhouse and having a wheelhouse, and I don't want to steal Matt's thunder, so I'm not going to talk about enclosures.
You don't have to. He's back with us. He's back with us.
Hello, Matt. Are you back?
Hello.
There you go. Yeah, no, and you saw that message I just put up. Keith is watching McCumber, of course, and he's been a big promoter of the Audiomobile products. So I thought I'd put up his comment. Sorry, you're back, and it looks like your connection's much stronger. So I'm going to let you continue. We were just dialoguing a little bit about what you were just saying about the brand and how you pioneered so many things over the years.
Well, thanks. So as Romesh mentioned, form factor, size matters. To some degree, consumers have created a little bit of an urban myth that all low-profile, small form factors, thin, slim, whatever you want to call them, suck. And that's because there is a proliferation of drivers out there that were made to be ridiculously small, but then their performance is inherently compromised because you can't have excursion and power handling if you don't have a big enough voice coil. So our sort of genesis or muse of thinking was, how do we take and build a driver that will deliver the kind of full format, high excursion, high power handling performance, and find a way to fit it into a compact form factor that would meet the needs of your typical truck box application. I would use the analogy that rear enclosures, whether it's for an exotic like behind the seat of a Ferrari or a Lamborghini or something, or a truck application, they're all very, very slim. But the analogy I like is that no one would build a door speaker that's an inch or an inch and a half inch deep, because if the standard door will accept 2 to 3 inches, who needs an inch deep speaker, right? For most applications. So our goal was to deliver full format performance, great sound quality, but also to address not only the mounting depth as well as the very, very small airspace. As one of our dealers famously put, I've never had a driver work in such freakishly small enclosures. And I don't think anyone's ever said that about any other brand's drivers except Audiomobile.
Yeah, I mean the enclosure sizes are almost illogical, right? They just
They are
defy all common.
So, I mean, obviously, this doesn't just happen overnight. You don't just will it to be that you come up with a driver that happens to work in such small requirements. Having said that, I know we've got a lot to cover here. I guess we're going to break this down into two parts. The first part is let's get to know a little bit about the technologies that make it perform the way that it does, Matt. If that's okay with you, I'd like to learn a little bit about the design and the technology, and then maybe we can take a look at what the actual lineup of product is, and then we'll round it out like that. I'm sure we're going to get some comments, guys. If you're tuning in, I see a lot of retailers tuning in right now. If you've got questions, I'll do my best to bring them up. If not, we can maybe bring them up at the end once we learn what we're about to go through. All right, so talk to us a little bit, Matt. I mean, that's what people want to know. People want to understand, how does Audiomobile do what it does? How do these products do what they do when everybody else can't seem to do it? What can you tell us?
Well, that's a valid point. Our sort of core message, I'm going to show you an ad here from a year or so ago we ran, which focuses on both the truck application solutions, and we use the technology as defined of higher performance in a smaller package. And we think that pretty well sums up what our reason for being is. Whether it's higher power capability in your cell phone or higher performance in a subwoofer, better technology is defined as being a smaller form factor. In the case of the Audiomobile product, we recognize that many years ago there was going back to the 90s and early 2000s, a application or an enclosure called a isobaric or a clamshell mounting. I think you have a slide of that. And what this basically was designed to do, and is a well-documented technology, is you use two drivers, one in the enclosure, one outside of the enclosure. It basically doubles the power handling while reducing the VAS, or the volume of airspace required, in half. And this was a kind of a hot enclosure solution, both for bandpass and sealed enclosures, to a lesser degree in vented boxes. The problem with it is that with one driver, and this was again pre-thin drivers, the back end, the motor structure and frame of one of the drivers was intruding into the space. So you certainly couldn't put this behind the seat of an exotic. You certainly couldn't put it under the seat of a truck. So we, from discussions with some really high-end pro sound audio engineers, realized that there was a way to create a single driver that would replicate that, because those two drivers work in tandem as one, and it basically involves using a very high-powered voice coil to replicate the performance of two drivers, as well as high moving mass, because as you know, air provides back pressure. So the smaller the box, the more power, the more magnetic force you need to sort of battering ram, if you will, the air to work properly in such tiny enclosures. There's been other companies that sort of touched on this, but they didn't really fully understand what was required to do it. So we like to say that specifically our GTS, which was the first series to really focus on this, is kind of the penultimate example of an isobaric type of driver. Two drivers, works in a crazy small driver, but housed in a single low-profile driver.
As limited as my knowledge is to this, and when it comes to speaker design and doing what you're trying to do, right? You mentioned such high pressure that's being built, and you now have to counter, right? As a battering ram. It's not just the power. You're talking about all the materials and the support, that everything that goes with it, the pressure that is going against, everything needs to be beefed up.
Yes, that's true. As the axiom goes, no chain is any stronger than its weakest link, as you would know from automotive kind of things. You can have a 1,000 horsepower engine, and if the transmission rear end, transaxle, whatever, it can't take the torque, bad things will happen. So one of the things that we recognized early on, and this actually pays benefits in two ways, all you really hear with a speaker is the cone, because the cone is what's connected to the air, which is connected to your ear, right? Many companies that continue to make deep mounting depth drivers, is because they use inexpensive material cones, which are inherently weak unless they are shaped in a conical shape, because you gain strength by having a cone. I'll give you an example. So all of our drivers currently use what we call our CLS cone. So it's actually a composite a composite pulp-based cone that's Kevlar infused. And in the case of this, it's actually the top piece here is one layer of that material, which is actually 5 layers Kevlar reinforced. And then the unibody cone, which is what the coil setter is connected to. And you can actually see there's some vents in here to let air out from the pole piece. And here in the outer areas, you can see a little bit of discoloration. That's where the 2 cone assemblies are laminated together. So at the outer area of the cone where it's most likely to deform, it's fully 10 layers of Kevlar reinforced. So this gives us a Young's modulus, or a stiffness to mass ratio, that's pretty much unparalleled in the industry. The reason that we do that, not only does it not deform, so it helps with the sound quality, but if you don't have a super stiff cone in a shallow woofer, it will deform. So our whole shallow mount frame and motor structures all start with the cone, because if the cone has to be deep, you can't make a shallow speaker.
We have an image here of the different layers that you were just referring to.
Yep. This cone, as we refer to as CLS, which stands for Composite Laminated Sandwich, was actually developed for Pro Sound 18-inch subwoofers, because as you know, if you have a piston area that's that big, it's going to be subject to deformation at the outer areas. And as a result, those drivers tend to be relatively shallow, but a huge piston area. So we basically took that cone technology, doubled it up, and then reduced it down to 8, 10s, and 12s. So one of my favorite parlor tricks, if you will, is to hand one of these cones to a guy and say, put your thumb and finger behind it, try to bend that. And
it's that kind of stiff.
Yeah, they're like, huh? So yeah, we sweat the details, and our cones cost us a lot of money, if for no other reason that every one of our drivers uses 2 cones, and it's a very expensive cone. But it is not done for marketing hyperbole. It is done to ensure that we can have a shallow mount driver that will not distort.
Very good. So we start with the cone. What's the next step in being able to achieve these type of performance levels?
So the other sort of yin to the yang of distortion is the voice coils, or I should say the linear excursion envelope. You can make a driver that has light moving mass, a short coil or whatever. It will be very efficient. It will not, however, take high power, and it will not have long linear excursion, or what generally is referred to as linear X-max. I'll refer to the same sample again. So if you look at our drivers, they have a very, very robust multi-layer voice coil on a capped-on former. And this is to allow it to not only have very high moving mass, which, as I said, is a key ingredient of maybe the principal core requirement in a isobaric type of driver. So it will take very, very high power. It also has very, very long X-max, somewhere in the neighborhood of, compared to your typical shallow mount subs, 50 to 100% more linear excursion one way. That's not a small amount. Go ahead.
No, it's just, you know, I've heard a lot of shallow woofers. No brand, just in general. And most of the time I'm like, you know, kind of is good, but not really, sort of. So I want to know, you know, is it just the X-Max that makes the final oral experience what it is? Because it can't just be that, is it?
Well, so as I said, the yin and the yang of it, the 2 primary things that cause audible distortion is the cone, which, as we said, was the primary, or the primary ingredient that is connected to the air, connected to your ear. The other one is the voice coil being driven out of the magnetic gap, because if we agree that distortion is objectionable, and you want to keep the distortion as low as possible in amplifiers under 1%, and loudspeakers you know, under 5 to 10% maybe on subwoofers, what ends up happening is once the voice coil is driven out of the magnetic gap, you have enough power to do it and not enough linear excursion, your distortion will jump up to 20, 30, 40%. And I can assure you that sounds really bad.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So if we've cured the cone deformation distortion aspect, and we make sure that our voice coils remain in the gap. In fact, there's actually another point that we do that is, again, kind of proprietary to us. I shouldn't say proprietary, unique among drivers in our category. As you know how a rev limiter works on a motor, it ensures that you can't overdrive the engine's reciprocating mass capability. Our suspension, and we like to use the analogy that the surround and the spider are sort of an analog to a shock absorber and springs. They balance and support each other. Our suspension actually works as sort of a rev limiter to make sure that the voice coil can never fully leave the magnetic gap. So as a result, our drivers are inherently stable and almost impossible to cause audible distortion, because the absence of audible distortion is a key in sound quality.
100%. We have a cutaway. Would that demonstrate what you're talking about here, image-wise?
It will help, sure. We can shift to that.
There you go.
This actually is it addresses more one of the things back to the shallow mounting depth. So most speakers have what we call a rear axial vent. So as the cone moves rearward, it will push air out the rear of the motor. The sort of urban myth is that somehow adds cooling. It's really a function of when that cone goes backwards, the air has got to go somewhere.
It's got to go somewhere. It's got to vent. Mm-hmm.
It's got to vent, right? It would be, having a motor in a car, you have exhaust, because where would it go if you didn't have exhaust pipes, right? What we recognized, and we're not alone in this, is that it's really not the mounting depth of the driver that's the penultimate concern. It's really the enclosure depth. Right? The driver may fit into the box, but if you have to have a space of up to 1 inch behind the rear of the driver to vent the motor, to make sure it doesn't chuck from noise or anything, you typically increase the depth of the driver by 1 inch. So having a solid motor does two things. It provide additional steam to help as a form of heat sink, but also, as this illustration rendering shows, the motion, we vent the majority of drivers, all of the air sides. So think side exhaust, side pipes, if you will, as a Corvette, and allows us to fit the back of the driver right up against.
Right. So the space of where the back wall of that enclosure can now be right up against pretty much the bottom of the driver, because you're venting this way instead of down.
The image Romesh had, that's our, that's actually Evo 8 drivers, and you can see it's a solid motor on all of those. And
let's take a look there. Oh, there you are.
Yeah, that's a critical thing. You'll note the absence of any rear axial vent. We currently don't have a driver that has a rear axial vent, because we are firmly committed to, as they say in politics, it's the economy, stupid. When it comes to enclosures, it's the depth of the enclosure. That's what matters.
Got another shot of that back here. There you go. Like, it's totally sealed. There's nothing coming out from the backside.
Yeah, this is only can be only accomplished if you have a suitably vented frame, and our frames were designed around the geometries of our shallow cone design. As say in the automotive manufacturing thing, there is what they call the merge, which is where you put the body and all of the interior stuff on top of the chassis and motor, right? When those come together, that's called the merge. So our engineering team basically designed our drivers to be the same way. The top half has to be a shallow frame, properly vented, shallow cone, and then the merge comes when you bolt the motor to the other subassemblies. If both of those are engineered to be as shallow as possible and there's no rear axial vent, you end up with a very shallow driver that performs like a full format driver.
So let's dive a little bit deeper into that. You no axial rear vent, which is unconventional, right? How do you achieve the cooling?
So this is that's a good story. If you show the next slide with the frame, this is a custom tool, what we call has a cooling technology we call FABRAC, and basically that stands for forced air biradial asymmetrical cooling. So
wow, that's a serious acronym.
It's a serious acronym, bordering on too much, but it does properly reflect what we do that's different. There's basically two types of cooling. There's conduction cooling and there's convection cooling. Convection cooling implies air. A lot of companies pay a lot of attention to that, and air cooling is fine, right? Fans work. The pumping action of the motor, of the cone and voice coil being responsible to that. But as I like to say, you know why VW and Porsche no longer make air-cooled engines? because from a cooling standpoint, they suck. Much better to cool via conduction, which means big pieces of steel and aluminum and or copper, because they will absorb and or dissipate the heat. So we focus more on that. We have a huge amount of effort to make sure our air cooling works and works really good, but it's really sort of a redundant secondary thing, because conduction cooling works much better. So all of our drivers weigh a fair amount considering how small they are. The analogy we like to use, if you have a small spoon and you put in a hot cup of coffee, it's going to get very hot very quickly. If you put a big tablespoon in that cup of coffee, it's going to be able to absorb and dissipate the heat much better.
Here's an image to support what you're talking about, I believe.
Yeah, this is actually an example that does both. This is a truly proprietary technology. It's what we call our ICAR, which stands for intercooled composite aluminum radiator, and it's analogous to a intercooler in a car. In the case of a turbocharged or supercharged vehicle, the cooler and denser the charge is, the better. I think we would all agree that in any technology, whether it's motors or brakes or woofers, heat is the enemy. So you want to do everything you can to evacuate the heat. This is a piece that we pioneered 7 years ago in our original Elite 2200 series. So it serves both, as you can see, it's a bilateral. So it allows cooling air to be drawn in on the lower vents, hot air to be exhausted from the upper vents. It also sandwiches between the frames. So any heat that is conducted from the voice coil to the ICAR is then dissipated to the frame. So the aluminum frame itself becomes a big heat exchanger. But more importantly, the pumping action of the coil and cone and dust cap is acting like fan cooling over the ICAR. So the cooler the ICAR remains, the more it will suck the heat out of the voice coil. So it effectively transfers the heat in an incredibly efficient manner. The alternative to doing that would have been to have tooled custom frames that put the ICAR or its equivalent in intimate contact within a half a millimeter or so of the voice coil, because as you know, the heat sink needs to be in close proximity to the heat source to work effectively.
So that's like an intercooler for a sub.
Yeah, basically, here's a close-up image of the ICAR. We have a new series that will be coming out later this year that uses a larger version of this, but as you can see, it's a machined aluminum washer plate, if you will. So the cold air can be drawn in from the bottom. The hot air is exhausted across the top. The pumping motion of the cone and voice coil and dust cap cools this, and the cooler it is, the more optimally the driver will perform. You may have heard of the term power compression. This is not really used in car audio, but it is used in pro sound because they're running huge amounts of power for hours and hours through the PA system. What power compression basically means is that much like with an amplifier, as it heats up, it becomes less efficient. The unused energy gets converted to heat. Well, where you want to, what ends up happening as the woofer heats up, it will actually retard the amount of SPL you can get out of the speaker, much as a decibel to 2 decibels. Well, that's pretty significant. That would be like cutting your amplifier power by 50% or more.
Almost by half.
Yeah, almost.
Yeah, exactly. So by not only does this piece increase the reliability because a cooler motor or engine will run better, more efficiently, but in the case of the power consumption, it's directly to how long, how loud your system will play.
Okay, right. I'm sure we can continue for an hour just on the different technology and design elements of this woofer, but we do want to get into the current offering as well. Is there anything else we want to touch on, Matt, before we jump into actual product?
I think you have a slide of our frame, the black frame that we use. There you go. So this is our custom tooled frame we used on both of our stamped frame or GT series. That would be our GT2 2000 series, and the next slide back, and our GTS, which is sort of our bread and butter series. You will note that It's a custom tool. We don't share this. It's proprietary to us. It actually has two separate ventings. There's delta vents, the triangles that echo our logo around the base adjacent to the, I should say, adjacent to the spokes of the frame or the legs of the frame. And then there's also smaller slot vents that provide additional cooling. So the idea is cold air can be drawn in through the lower vents. Hot air, because heat rises, is exhausted through the delta vents. And we use a version of this frame on both our GTS and our GT2 series. And this is sort of the embodiment of what we call our FAB-RAC, or forced air biradial cooling. And it works remarkably well. But as I said, that is not our primary cooling function. That's an addendum, an addition to help evacuate the hot air. But the masses of steel and aluminum that we use in our motor, that's really the key to our reliability and performance.
All right. And that last image I showed there with the inside of the basket, you see where that washer that you were referring to is installed there.
Yeah, that's a sectional, or I should say a picture of the Elite series with the cone and voice coil removed. It also, the centerpiece there, that's actually not the top plate. That's an additional shorting ring, or what we call a flux stabilization device. It serves to lower the inductance and also wick heat out of the motor. I can show you a close-up of what that basically looks like here as well. So this basically is a representation of the 50 millimeter aluminum cooling slug. So this both is cooled by the pumping action of the underside of the dust cap. The cooler this remains, and again, this is pulling heat or wicking heat, if you will, off of the top of the pole piece and motor. So this remains, the cooler the voice coil can remain. In addition, this also serves the role of a what's referred to as a shorting ring, which lowers the inductance of the speaker. The lower the inductance, the better the transient performance of the woofer. And as you know, transient performance, or the ability to start and stop quickly, is a critical function of loudspeakers, because they have to reproduce all the nuances of the audio signal. So nobody needs a subwoofer to play out to 1,000 or 2,000 cycles. In Pro Sound, they actually do, because generally a Pro Sound subwoofer is working with, married to, if you will, a horn driver, which won't play under 1,000 cycles. They're not concerned, or I should say they are concerned about making sure that a 15 or an 18-inch woofer will actually play out to 1,000 cycles or above. So this, like our iCar, serve a dual role of both evacuating heat from the motor and also lowering the inductance, so our woofers are fast. So they have great transient performance, because that's a hallmark or another component of what makes a driver sound good.
So great X-Max, cone technology that's super rigid, cooling technology, not just one, but multiple layers of cooling.
Correct.
Cast basket, proprietary design with auxiliary cooling elements built into it as well. I want to know what the offering is. Romesh, I know that you have a couple of the drivers. How many series are there that we need to understand here?
How many series are there?
I can answer that for you. Currently, we're shipping 3.
Okay.
Next, that's our GT2 2000 series, which is sort of our entry-level product. We like to think of it as sort of a Camaro V8. So very high performance. It's rated at 400 watts RMS, fits in truck boxes fantastically. It was actually developed as a brother series, if you will, to our very successful GTS product. They share core DNA. So we like to think of the GTS as like a Corvette V8. Its DNA versus a Camaro V8, nearly identical. Just one has more giddy up. Both low profile, both take a ton of power. Those both share our unique 6-spoke frame image that we showed. So those represent sort of our good, better, and then our least expensive cast frame product is called our Evo series. That's been in the market for about 5 years now. It's viewed as arguably the highest performance low profile, or what we call a slim driver series in the market. And I say that because it'll handle 500 watts on the 10s and 12s, over 400 watts on the 8-inch, which is the driver that Romesh was showing earlier. And it's not the shallowest driver in the market, but it is the highest performance slimline driver on the market. And this is pretty widely recognized by anybody who's used it. So we have basically a good, better, best.
So
All
the,
right,
the mounting depths, I'm just going to flip these up here.
Yeah.
So this over here is the 8. That's the 10. From a mounting depth standpoint, they're almost. I'm trying to.
Yeah, we can see that
they're almost similar or very similar. Like on a table, they're very close.
They're within about 1/4 of an inch. The 8-inch uses a more traditional motor structure that is, if you will, hung under the cast aluminum frame. The Evo 10 and 12 actually use what we would refer to as sort of a hybrid motor. Most woofers either have the motor slung underneath the basket or fully encapsulated within the frame. We opted to, again, based on our goal of delivering a full format performance excursion envelope, the top plate is inside of the frame, and only the magnet and the T-yoke are underneath it. And this is, again, unique in the marketplace to us. I would, in our developmental discussions, we referred to this, you may recall some years ago, Chrysler talked about their cab forward design, which was designed to improve the packaging, to get more leg space, more cabin thing. We use that same concept to be able to lower the mounting depth. And it works terrifically well because it's not a, it's an evolution, hence the term Evo. It's an evolution of the traditional, well-worn subwoofer technology, but we were able to do it in a way that significantly reduced the mounting depth without compromising the overall performance of the driver. There are other designs that have been used to make a shallower driver, but they generally come at the expense of performance. They have, I'll give you one example, one leading brand, they make a shallower driver, or a couple of them. However, the top plate, which is arguably the key portion of the subwoofer, the top plate is fully half of what our Evos are. Our Evos use a 10 millimeter top plate, about 0.40 inches, and that's the kind of thick top plate that gets magnetic flux, helps with the cooling. You don't generally find that in a woofer that's under $450 to $500 and 7 to 8 inches deep. We will package that in our slimmest or slimline series of Evos. So again, that's pretty unique technology.
I'm going to go ahead and ask the question that everybody wants to know. So let's talk about a 10-inch driver. I'm going to put you on the spot. Maybe you have the specs, maybe we can look it up. But like on a 10-inch sub, what kind of space do we need enclosure-wise for a 10-inch to perform?
So it depends a little bit on our series. Back to the analogy about having to have a motor that would allow the cone to serve as a battering ram in a very small enclosure space. Our GTS series, which we generally recommend at 0.5 cubic feet, it's gotten fabulous reviews in that enclosure. We've had a number of what we refer to as Top Gun retailers put them in as little as 0.33, 0.28.
0.28?
Yep. One of our dealers did a. There's the GTS right there.
We're talking almost a 0.2, like a quarter of a cubic foot.
Yeah, if you keep in mind that the sort of standard back going a decade or more, one company used the expression all the base in half, the 0.66 cubic foot thing. So we're fully half of that again, right? Wow. And it's because when I say our GTS series is sort of the penultimate, meaning the last most advanced isobaric type design. That's not an overstatement. That's not a boast. One of our dealers in the Southeast actually did 2 Lamborghini installs. And you can find these images on both our Facebook page as well as our website, which is audiomobile.net. 2 Lamborghinis for a single customer. For the Spider, he did a footwell single GTS 10, 0.28 cubic feet. He actually had to fiber back around the frame, so the motor was outside the enclosure to get how constricted the space was. And then for the coupe Aventador, a pair of ESs between the seats up high, 0.58 for the pair of 10-inch woofers. So when somebody says they're freakishly small, they are not kidding.
I'm not going to lie. You have my curiosity definitely piqued. I mean, I haven't personally heard this type of driver in that type of enclosure, but I have seen a lot of feedback from a lot of different dealers. I got one question coming in. Would this be good application for like underseat for like a Beamer or an Audi? Does that fit? Do you know from experience, or have you seen from customers that have done this?
So because we also are an importer for another brand out of Germany that makes vehicle-specific sets for BMW, Mercedes, etc., we're intimately familiar. Those modules, because there's different particular modules that fit into the floor pan of various BMW platforms, those require more like a 2.5-inch mounting depth. And they're not really a small sealed enclosure. They're actually sort of a pseudo infinite baffle. They actually vent out. So our drivers, neither form factor nor mounting depth would really be well suited for that.
Okay, very good. There's so many from a fabrication standpoint, from a salesperson standpoint. Now you're talking about it. We're going to circle back to that word that we used in the beginning of the show, solution, for a lot of scenarios, because when I didn't know, I thought we were going to be talking about like half a cubic foot. I had no idea we're going down as low as like a 0.28. That is a game-changing moment, because there are so many vehicles out there that, man, you just don't have the space. Exotic vehicles, you use the example of a Lamborghini. We have a lot of dealers that specialize in these, higher-end, tight quarter type of applications where this could be a solution for. Back of, under bench pickups, which we have a lot of pickups up here. So it's very interesting to see that you've developed a product that really meets that type of niche need. So it's very, very exciting. We're coming down to the end of the show. I want to address a couple of statements and comments that came through. What is the commitment from Importel as far as the line inventory? Is this something that is ready to go soon? Like, what is the timeline on this? Let's just get the dealers the right information.
Matt?
Yeah, Romesh. Sorry.
Sorry.
Romesh. Yeah.
Well,
so go ahead.
Romesh can confirm they've received their initial shipment in the last month, so they are
in
stock. Majority of our drivers. We remain in good stock position at our main warehouse in the Midwest. We have another container that was unfortunately delayed, but it is on the water now, and we expect to have that by middle of next month. Actually, probably but early next month. And this will bring some additional drivers into stock that we've been out of stock on for several months.
And that's really to clarify, you've had dealers, and, we want to make sure that we're transparent and people know what the plan is moving forward, other than the obviously inventory challenges that everybody across the board has been facing in the last, we'll call it 18 months. I guess the message or information that I want to get out there is, where are we going moving forward starting from now? So we're going to have consistent flow, full range. Is there anything else we need to know from a dealer standpoint?
Well, yeah, so two things. The next generation of our Elite series, which is, again, the picture that's the background for Romesh image, is a next generation of that product, which is called the 3200 series or 32 series. That has been approved and is in parts are on order. We will ship that by the middle part of the fourth quarter. So that will actually give us 4 series of drivers. This has been in development for 7+ years. It's not a radical change from our previous series. It is evolved, however, and part of the reason for that is one of the things we did not touch on is what we call our M-car, which is our modular coupled acoustic radiators. They're pre-tuned passive radiators that allow you to take that typical 0.5 cubic foot box that you would use for one of our 10s and drop in an additional radiator without changing the box size or the amplifier in any way. It basically converts any of our 10-inch woofers to a 13-inch woofer, which obviously, because of the 100% increase in cone area, you get about a dB.5 sensitivity increase. This translates in car to as much as 10 dB louder. And when the review was actually done by Gary Springay of Cogent Labs for PASS, he did a measurement with the driver in a 0.5 cubic foot box and then with the radiator in a 0.6 cubic foot box, and it measured fully 10 dB louder. In fact, when he did the measurements, his comment to me after the fact was, I was like, that can't be right. Again, this was done in his lab. So he did the test again, same result. So when you can get that kind of literally twice as loud for a very modest additional amount of money and no change in your amplifier impedance or load or increase in box size, that is, by our definition, truly a game changer, because no one else can do that. Period. Full stop.
Just by cutting an extra hole in the box and adding a passive.
Or we have a new enclosure that's coming that will actually have a removable panel so that dealers can use the single 10 versus the 10 with the radiator and do an A/B comparison. And when it's like twice as loud, it's the proverbial fatal alternative question to the customer. Did you want the one that's twice as loud for a couple extra $100 or no?
Yeah.
Right.
So and then that's, I'm wondering if they can even add that later, but why would you? It's not a big price upgrade. You know what I mean?
No, it's certainly less expensive. I mean, to get that kind of acoustical output difference, you would have to quintuple or more your amplifier power, and that assumes that you actually have a subwoofer that would benefit from that. And when it comes to shallow mount drivers, other than our drivers, particularly our Evo and GTS, there are no low profile shallow mount drivers that will handle as much as 500 or more watts, at least not that I'm aware of.
Amazing. Matt, you've been an incredible guest. Thank you so much for joining us today and sharing with us your knowledge. I want to leave you a last opportunity to do one of two things. A, what message do you have for dealers that have been supporting the brand in Canada? And then what message do you have for dealers who might be tuning in and discovering your brand for the first time? So 2 parts.
So to the first part, Audiomobile is unique in the marketplace. We are aware of our position in the market, even though we've been around as a brand for decades, and more recently we've been shipping continuously for about 8 going on 9 years. The drivers are state of the art. We engineer all these parts and systems in California, and we have an incredibly high caliber manufacturing partner in Asia. And this allows us to deliver products that are really without parallel in the industry. We have lots and lots of dealers who sell other brands, and they swear up and down nothing is on par with our product. In addition, it's very easy to add Audiomobile because having been the founder of Diamond Audiomobile back in the late 80s.
You founded Diamond Audio?
Yes, I was the founder of Diamond Audiomobile.
We missed that part in the history.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, it's over. Previous to that, I built Precision Power from, as I like to say, the proverbial outhouse to the penthouse, and that was accomplished in
like the Pastel days?
3 years.
Pastel
Yeah,
days.
I can't lay claim for the artwork, but the white amplifier.
But that's the era I refer to it as. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Well, as I said, they went from being a not a great brand to a brand that rapidly blew past the other Arizona brands, literally in the space of 6 months to a year. But anyway, back on point, the point I was alluding to is that most other brands, when they go to a dealer, they go, being a full line brand, they would say, oh, we have amps and speakers and wire and cable and coaxials and et cetera, et cetera. And most dealers are probably content with their mix. They don't need to have a whole suite of products. What everybody needs is better performance in key niches. And as I alluded to before, size matters. And everybody, whether they buy a sedan or a coupe or a SUV or a truck, there's a certain amount of utility that is built into their calculus of what vehicle they buy. So our drivers will deliver absolutely uncompromising performance in astonishingly small enclosures. And this allows retailers to add this. They don't have to replace a line that they're currently selling. It's very easy to add us because all they need to do is sell less of something that isn't as great as our product.
For those applications specifically on top of that.
Well, for any application that involves subwoofers, because as one guy said, I have customers come in and say, I want big bass and I don't care how big the box is. Said no one ever.
Said no one ever. Yeah,
Right.
This is true.
So that small form factor solutions is really our niche, and we like to think that we are unparalleled in that regard.
Exciting stuff. Well, thank you for that today, Matt. Can't thank you enough. We'll definitely touch back with you and see how this goes, and we'll maybe touch back when you have that new product in. Talk about that a little bit more. And
look forward to it.
Thank you very much. Take care, sir.
Okay.
Thanks, Matt. Appreciate your time.
Good day.
Audiomobile back in Canada with Importel. I mean, you know what? There's no question about it. It's a very niche product, and I can definitely see dealers finding it interesting for the specific tool, or not tools, but situations that they encounter on a daily.
Well, niche is a funny term because it's niche to almost, I'd say, most of the cars that come in.
Yeah. I guess when I say niche,
I mean, space is always an issue.
Space
right?
is always an issue.
Like
always.
we keep talking about it, it's like, oh, it's going to fit in trucks, and it's going to fit in Lambos, and how many Lambos do I get, or depending on where you are in the country.
But he nailed it. I want the biggest box possible, and said no one ever. Nobody wants a huge box.
Right?
Who does?
Right. I mean, and then the fact that you can throw the passive radiator in, right? And
I didn't even know about that. That's cool too.
Right. I mean, it's like you think about all the vehicles where you've got that little, you get a conventional trunk with that little spot in the trunk in that little kind of nook where there's either a factory woofer there or there isn't, and it's designed to store your coolant or whatever, your oil or whatever. You just take that spot and there you go.
It's hard to. I wish we had a. You know what? Next time we do this, make sure we get an enclosure of what a 0.28 enclosure looks like. Just to get a visual. That's not big.
Like it's
like basically a box enough to go around.
Right, because literally the conventional box size typically for most ends is the cardboard box, which would be roughly the 0.75 whatever
roughly,
it is, right?
Roughly, yeah.
Right. Well, now you're just basically saran wrapping the driver. Right? It's like
that's a good way to put it. It's nonsense. It is.
Yeah,
it's
nonsense.
Pretty cool.
Right.
Digits are below. Importel distributing Audiomobile in Canada. Make sure you get a hold of them. I know there's more questions to be asked, and I think that's, I think everybody should give Importel a call if you're concerns with anything inventory oriented or where they're headed or whatnot. I think what we did today was, introduce the product, get everybody to know what the key features of this product does, and let everybody know that anything moving forward, you contact Importel, right?
Do it up. Contact us, email us, phone us. Facebook,
and make sure every time you call Importel, ask for Romesh. He loves that.
Do it up. I'm here. Do it up. I got a phone.
I hear you, man. Thanks for joining me on this one, man. It was cool.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Ben.
I'll talk to you soon, Ro.
Thanks, everybody.
So there you have it. Importel, Audiomobile. Man, small enclosure specialist is what I'm going to call it. Really, really cool. I look forward to maybe getting an opportunity one day soon to hear what that actually sounds like, because it's kind of hard to wrap my head around. There's really small enclosures, but kudos to them. Great technology, great design, and big shout out to Matt Overpeck for joining us today. And that wraps up our CMA Connected for this Monday. We'll be back this Wednesday and Friday. We've got a CMA Live going down Wednesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern. It's all about Essential Gear Part 2. I'll remind you a little bit more about that on Wednesday when we got our friend Ricky from SiriusXM. They'll be joining us on Wednesday. So that's it for now. Man, have a good week, everybody. We'll see you next time when we connect.